Michael.
Alastair.
Brilliant, amazing. How did that happen?
Do you know what? I think that's the school calling.
I think it's either the school or my work calling me as soon as we're going to begin this conversation. So that's a good start. But
Yeah.
I'll ignore them. Yeah. You know, I mean, you're in New York. We need to strike whilst the iron is hot. I think.
Actually, I'm in Chicago. So my team is in New York, but I reside in Chicago. So that's where I'm at.
And are you preparing at the moment for an auction? Is that what's going on?
Yes, we just launched yesterday online and closes on June 2nd. So we're live.
I mean, the one thing I'd say, though, is that I have enjoyed the back and forth preparing for this one, because I think we have a great conceit for this episode. Because as we know, we're living in the middle of a crisis. And I think there is this idea that historically, quite often artists in particular, they can respond in a creative fashion.
Oh, yeah.
What's first up? I mean, there's I think it looks gorgeous, this wooden chair designed, I see here in 1962 by George Nakashima. Should we start with that one? Tell me a little bit about the designer himself. He didn't come to design until a little bit later, is that right?
That's correct. George Nakashima is of Japanese heritage, but an American, and really studying architecture at MIT and graduating in 1931. And really getting the basis for modernist principles in design and in architecture.
But it sounds like there's this, in terms of his biography, as I understand it, this crucial moment that happens during the Second World War. So a conflict of a very different sort to the one we're all experiencing today, but nevertheless a crisis for the world. What happens to him at that point?
Well, like many Americans of Japanese descent, he was put into an internment camp. In his case, and for his family, it was in Idaho. And so this was, a tragic event, really a blight on the history of the United States, frankly. And but he made the most of it here. And in Idaho, he was working with furniture by salvaging scrap wood and what he could find.
I mean, obviously he can't design buildings, and you need to be able to fill your time, and you need to be able to retain your mental health and well-being, I guess. And one way, I suppose, of doing that is to be thinking about, as you say, furniture making.
No question. I mean, it was very simple joinery, very simple cabinetry that he executed at this time. But it really triggered, this sensibility that he had of working with the material he had, embracing the material he had, and making something, frankly, poetic out of what was available. And that continued for his whole career.
So it's fair to say that clearly this had a huge impact on him, but it's a turning point for his career, right? After this, he is no longer an architect in essence, he's a designer.
But it was really this moment of saying, I need to make the most of what this situation is. I need to take advantage of the materials I have. I need to, find inspiration from the people around me and create something. And it's this kind of interesting moment that we find ourselves in now where, I talk about it with my kids and my family, like, okay, we can't travel, we can't really move about, but what can we do with the things we have? And, even my kids and I are tinkering in the workshop in the garage, making small things. And I think it's shifting our thinking and, may prove to be a trajectory change for us. But I can imagine the same for designers working in this moment, that it's spurring creativity. What else can we do?
I like this idea that you're about to give up on a career in the auction business and set up your own design workshop. Okay, so, shall we actually have a look at the chair that you've picked that he created? Now, he's designed this a little bit later than the war, clearly, in 1962.
That's correct.
But tell me how, because I know that one of the things about him is, I guess, he fuses a tradition that he was familiar with from America with some of that traditional joinery techniques that we would associate with Japan.
Well, I think you can see that it's a synthesis of modernist principles and an Eastern tradition of an approach to design.
Because I love, when I look at it, I almost see the sort of silhouette of the back. I mean, it makes you think either of a sort of modernist harp, some sort of modern musical instrument, but also perhaps it's got the silhouette of some sort of Eastern temple, or at least there's some architectural element. And it seems as well that it almost, if it were a person, might be a person who's kneeling because of the proximity perhaps of the base to the ground.
Well, I like all of those concepts right there. So this is a great example of what he learned at the internment camps, in that the chair is put together without the use of hardware. And so it is joined without hardware. So what we see here, though, is a perfect fusion of east meeting west. If you look at the way that the seat is cantilevered over these two legs, it really appears like a modernist structure, like a pavilion, that like a cantilevered roof line, let's say, that you can sit upon. But then the backrest, yes, as it extends up, does have echoes of architecture. But then the way that the top rail overextends the silhouette of the backrest has a real echo of Eastern tradition, of a temple line, let's say. And so there is a perfect fusion of that. The brilliance of Nakashima is that his work really was bespoke. Clients would come, they would wander through the barns, as they're called, and choose slabs of wood that suited their taste. And what he would do is, when you're walking through, he would take a black marker or a black ink and write the client's name on the underside of the board. And more often than not, you see the client's name and not Nakashima. He only signed his work later, so everybody thinks maybe, oh, it's not by Nakashima, it's signed somebody else's name. But this is a great clue of how bespoke and important his work is.
I love that he made your life so easy. If you've got that information on the underside of the board.
Yes.
So for our next chair, so we're moving slightly back in time. And actually this next one, I imagine, will probably feel a bit more familiar perhaps than the Nakashima. What have you selected, Michael?
This is a lounge chair by Charles and Ray Eames. It is the LCW, lounge chair wood, as they called it. And really one of the true icons and important chairs of the 20th century for really a number of reasons. This is a chair that comes from experiments in molded plywood during another crisis moment, which was World War II.
So just, I mean, in terms of the biography, because this is so important, the experimentation, was this almost government sanctioned? They were being briefed. There was a sort of drive to create cheaper, efficient, lightweight materials for the army, for the military.
Yes, precisely. So they were working on a contract basis, as I understand it, but they were making experiments in plywood for nose cones of airplanes, for stabilizers, wingtips, a whole range of things. And this was a commission from the U.S. government to produce products in molded plywood. This is really after, like, the latest stages of the war. But again, it's just a sheet, bent once and then twice. So you have a contoured seat this way, and it contours in the opposite direction, perpendicular. So this is really what made them revolutionary and led to the chair that we're seeing.
All of the moulding, which give these different curves and this sort of movement and undulations, they speak of high industry. They speak of being machines.
No question about it. I mean, chairs didn't look like this before this chair emerged. It's what made it really revolutionary. It satisfied a number of things. It does utilize new technology, this new plywood. Plywood is then, once you make the mold and you develop the form, you can mass produce it. And this is really the goal, is to make affordable but aesthetic or, compelling furniture for the masses. I mean, this was production furniture, but it was something that was really beautiful, revolutionary, and everybody could have a piece of it.
There's something about that Eames chair, perhaps because of its poise, that I think there's a confidence there that speaks to a wider cultural confidence that I guess we'd associate with America in those immediate post-war years. But this next piece has a very different, deliberately tongue-in-cheek, sort of deflating quality to it. It's sort of thumbing its nose, if you like, at the idea of a really confident society. Or would you, is that a fair description?
Precisely right.
So just describe for us, we've obviously moved from America in the 40s with Eames, the Eames chair, to we're in Italy in the 60s.
What you have are this group, Studio 65 in Turin, and then you have Super Studio in Florence. These groups of architects, these are radical thinkers coming out of architecture school or the Politecnico in each of those respective cities, and they start to think, what is the world really about? And they start to think, gosh, if we have moon landings, we have assassinations of leaders, we have, the film industry, we've got music, fashion, art, all of these things. They start to synthesize all of these things. And they're really saying everything we knew to be true, in this case, that columns stand upright and they hold up the roofs of great temples, and they point to stability and to, this deeply rooted notion of what's true. If that's all fallen down, where are we?
And it sounds from what you're saying that you have a bunch of young, radical designers who are very frustrated with the world order that they've inherited, but they haven't at any point lost their sense of humour. So I think, and this is my contention, and I could be wrong, Michael, but I think this may be Ionic rather than Doric. As
Oh, you could be right.
And, but, I don't want to sound pedantic about my classical architecture orders. But, as you say, rather than it being a piece of stone, the fact it's foam seems to be the key thing, because it's squidgy. It's not hard.
That's right.
It's something that you could almost sort of bounce off.
It's quite springy, but it sits in a nice way. I mean, it's not uncomfortable. I mean, it's meant as a perch. It's meant as a sculptural object in a room. I don't think that it's what everyone fights for to sit in to watch a movie. It really kind of sits there as an object, but it's sittable.
Well, I mean, okay, let's have a think about the final item I think that you've selected, which is another chair, and is one that I'm intrigued by because the sense of how it's emerged from crisis, I'm slightly less clear on perhaps, but why don't you describe what you've picked and who made it?
Well, I think that it's less about a specific crisis, but more about a change in thinking about how we approach design. So Hella Jongerius, I think, is brilliant at this. I think that she's incorporating elements that are both bespoke and the handmade, but applying it to industrial production.
I mean, the chair that I'm looking at, which I think is known as the backpack chair, it curiously almost looks like it's two chairs, even though it's only the one, which seem to have sort of backed into each other.
So this is a chair that has multiple functions, and really one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this was for that purpose specifically. It is a chair. You can lean against that cushion that's rolled around the backrest, but you can untether it, as you say, and use that as a blanket. I mean, it can become, a different type of seating. It's not for reading, let's say, but for comfort and for lounging. Further to that, you have these small shelves on the back. Once you take the backrest away, it can become a step stool. You can put these together. They can form even a bench or a bed. And so they're versatile, they're adaptable. And if you think about the moment that we're all in, kind of sheltering in place, when our furniture, our dining tables become our office, and then in the evenings they're back to a dining table, maybe it forms a fort, to play underneath for our kids. This is the moment. It's really a question that I pose to designers. How does furniture adapt throughout the day to various uses? Jongerius has actually kind of set the table for this to kind of be taken further.
I must say, I think it feels like a really inspired choice for now. It feels very resonant for our world now. But tell me a little bit about the date that she's a Dutch designer, when she first designed it and what the sort of context was it was emerging from, because it's more than a decade old, isn't it?
Yeah, this is from 2007. And so it kind of predates the last fiscal crisis we had, let's say, if we're looking at a specific crisis, but it's a 21st century concept.
I like the idea as well that it sort of it seems to be playing with the conceit that life is a long and perhaps arduous journey, and you need to have provisions and be prepared and have flexibility.
I think you're absolutely right. And, up until the moment that we're in right now, this crisis moment, people had actually changed their habits in terms of collecting. They were less inclined to have too many objects. They would have a few things that they would take with them that were adaptable to any space, but they wouldn't have a lot of bric-a-brac or, things on shelves. Now, actually, what's happening is people are saying, I guess my whole universe is contained within my apartment or within my home. And so that's causing a new shift in design. And I'm curious to see how those things now come together, because they're really 2 points that are running counter to each other. Having less or having more, or having what you need, or having something that's adaptable to any purpose that you might have if you are sheltering in place for months and even years to come.